Hello from New York. Welcome to this Earnest Talk. I'm your host, Michael Maloof, Head of Marketing here at Earnest Analytics, the leader in consumer and healthcare data for companies and investors. Today, I have the pleasure to introduce Xiaodan Pan, an associate professor at Concordia University in Canada, and Martin Dresner, a professor at University of Maryland. Dr. Pan's research, published in leading operations and logistics journals, leverages data analytics to enhance business operations and societal well-being. She focuses primarily on the retail and service sectors, where she analyzes consumer behavior, retail strategies, technological innovations, and last mile delivery. Dr. Pan investigates these domains given societal challenges, including economic fluctuations, natural disasters, public health emergencies, and societal inequalities. Dr. Dresner has served on the faculty of the University of Maryland's R.H. Smith School of Business since 1988. His research focuses on two broad areas: supply chain management and transportation economics and policy. Notably, he has been recognized among the world's best scientists by research.com and has been featured on the top 2% of most cited scholars and scientists globally, as ranked by Stanford University study in the Journal of PLS Biology. So Doctors Pan and Dresner took a deep dive into the Earnest transaction data over the last year to identify the efficacy of different post-COVID e-commerce strategies, including curbside pickup, extended return windows, virtual try-on tech, omni-channel building, and more. I'm excited to have them on today and to talk us through their findings based on the Earnest data. As a quick reminder to the audience, you can submit questions during our talk and we'll answer them at the end. Dr. Pan, Dr. Dresner, welcome. Thanks so much for coming.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to start out, and I would first like to thank Earnest Analytics for giving us the opportunity to present our research, and also, even more importantly, for providing us with the data so that we can actually conduct the research. I mean, this is really an invaluable way for us to look at questions that we think are both interesting and important. We're both business school professors, so we like to look at issues that we think are relevant to business managers, and your data really allows us to do this. I'd just like to tout my colleague again, Xiaodan Pan, who's, as you said, is an associate professor at Concordia University in Montreal. Her research focuses on looking at retailers' strategies under difficult times. And certainly there was no more difficult time than the pandemic. And so some of the research that we're going to discuss today looks at how retailers adapted their strategies during the pandemic. But even more importantly, we're going to try to tell you whether we think that those strategies are going to be relevant in a post-pandemic world, or whether they were just ones that worked well during the more difficult times. Some of her previous research, and a paper that I worked on with her that maybe some of your readers might be interested in, looked at how retailer strategies adapt during hurricanes. So when a hurricane comes, the retailers will try to sort of stock up on sort of essential items like bottled water. And we looked at how the various types of retailers were able to cope during those particularly difficult times. Anyhow, that's just sort of a summary of some of the work that we work on. Next page, please. Okay, so this presentation is going to consist of three parts. I'm going to talk about these resilient pandemic strategies. Xiaodan's going to talk about flexible e-commerce strategies. And I'll finish by discussing how retailers or other researchers can harness data to gather insights into their operational performance. Next slide. Okay, so what we wanted to do here is we wanted to look at some strategies that the department store chains adopted during the pandemic. And we thought that the department stores were a particularly good sector to look at because they've experienced a long-term decline in market share as they've lost business to both online retailers and also to retailers that specialize in certain items, sort of like apparel retailers or retailers of appliances or some other specialty items. So as these department store chains were losing business, the pandemic could have been a very sort of the last their last gasp, so to speak, and that the pandemic could have killed them off. So they really had to be very somewhat nimble and in adopting new strategies during the pandemic if they really want to survive the pandemic and thrive into the future. Next slide. Okay, so the first of these strategies we looked at was curbside pickup. And so during the pandemic, people were really concerned about getting close to other people. And so the department stores needed a way, and other stores as well, needed a way to be able to deliver their products to individuals without individuals getting into close contact with the sales associates. And so they adapted this policy that it became pretty popular during the pandemic, and that was curbside pickup. So you could go online, you could place your order, you could drive to the retailer, park in the parking lot, and contact the retailer, and they would come out and deliver packages and put them in the trunk of your car. I would add that this was a somewhat of an adaptation of a strategy that a number of retailers had been using prior to the pandemic, known as buy online, pick up in store, where you would place the order and then you go into the store and pick up an order. A lot of grocery retailers were using that. In a way, this curbside pickup was not as attractive to the retailer as buy online and pick up in store. I mean, it had to be the strategy that they used during the pandemic just for safety reasons. But buy online and pick up in store did get the buyers to go into the retailer's physical store, and while they're in the retailer's physical store picking up their orders, they would often buy something else. It was a way for the retailers to actually sell more than what the buyers initially intended to purchase with their online purchases. But anyways, it was a strategy. This curbside pickup was a strategy that the retailers did adopt for safety purposes. And in a way, it sort of supplemented or even replaced the buy online and pick up in store strategy that, as I said, had existed prior to the pandemic. Next slide. Okay, a second strategy that they adopted was to try to make ordering and returning easier for buyers. A lot of people were buying products through online sites, and they had to try on the products, and the question was, whether they would be willing to buy the products, with the potential of having to return the products. And so the retailers made it easier for them to do that, took the risk away from the consumers, and then they extended the time window that consumers had to return products that they didn't want. Quite often, these return windows were extended from 30 days to 60 days to 90 days, or even to a year. And so this was a risk reduction strategy that the retailers instituted in order to increase mainly online sales during the pandemic, but also physical store sales as well, to the extent that the physical stores were open. Next slide. Okay, a last strategy that the retailers undertook, we'll call it a technology strategy. It was a virtual try-on type strategy. And again, this sort of technology was used prior to the pandemic, became more important during the pandemic because a lot of the physical stores were closed or had restricted hours. The virtual try-on technology used artificial intelligence to allow customers to sort of maybe have their picture or a model on the screen, and then for the clothes to be sort of put onto that model, so that an individual would see how certain combinations of clothes fit, and it would help them to choose the clothes that they wanted to buy, and sort of give them a better idea of how the combination of clothes looked on them. So this virtual try-on technology expanded during the pandemic, but we also thought that this particular technology might be a type of technology that would actually work quite well after the pandemic, and would even work in combination with a retailer's physical store network. So you could sort of try on clothes, online, and go to physical stores, and maybe even try them on again in the physical change room before you bought them. And this would give you a sort of a better idea of what you would be looking for when you went to the physical store. So it was a type of technology that worked with both online selling and a combination of online and offline or physical store retailing. Next slide. As with all academics, we like to sort of think about these things with a theoretical background. And there was some articles written as to this type of strategies that retailers might adopt or any companies might adopt during a crisis. You can think about sort of four categories of strategies. One would be just exit. You're not doing well, and some restaurants, for example, may have just closed their doors and decided that they didn't want to operate it, and they didn't want to operate anymore. They were losing too much money, or other types of retailers might have done that. Now there's retrenchment. That is, take a look at the business that you're currently doing. You're doing prior to the pandemic. Think about how you can sort of reduce costs and cut down on some of your expenses and still operate, but in a reduced mode. A perseverance strategy is where you try to adapt your existing business operations for the crisis. And we think that this curbside pickup and return leniency or return time extension would be sort of perseverance strategies. You want to continue operating, need to operate in a way that sort of fits in better with the circumstances being, regulations that would restrict physical store hours and also the safety requirements of customers. And so curbside pickup and return leniency would be types of strategies that you would use to persevere during the pandemic, but may not be ones that you would want to continue after the pandemic ends. Finally, there's so-called innovation or pivot strategies that a lot of companies started offering during the pandemic. And the virtual try-on was, we think, one of these types of strategies where they adapted their business operations for not only the pandemic, but also ways that would work in a post-pandemic environment. And if you think of from the restaurant's perspective, a lot of them, were sort of forced to shut down their in-store dining, and they went to sort of more takeout and delivery type operations. In conjunction with these delivery platforms like DoorDash, Uber Eats. And a lot of the restaurants found that this was a good source of business. There were people who were sort of, would not normally order from restaurants because they didn't want to go out to the restaurants, now had this opportunity to be able to order and get the orders delivered into their homes. So this was an innovation or a pivot type strategy that would probably work, in a post-pandemic world. And so we would put the virtual try-on in that category of strategies as well. Next slide. All right, so we formulated, thanks to Earnest, we were able to get some data on sales during the pandemic from several department stores, and we gathered the data for a cross-section of time that included both the pre-pandemic and the pandemic period. And we wanted to see how these strategies and some of these department store chains adopted these strategies and some didn't. So we had sort of comparative data. We had some data on firms that did adopt these strategies and firms that didn't, so we could compare their sales performance to see whether these strategies actually work. And we also measured the strength of sort of the containment environment, the lockdown procedures that were taking place in a market. And so we collected this data that Oxford University researchers put out, called the Containment and Health Index, that measured the strength of the containment measures in a market. We had data that was on a market basis for various markets or cities across the United States. We had the level of the containment and health measures that were implemented in these markets. We had the strategies that the department stores were implementing. And then we had some performance data, that is the sales that the department stores were making in these particular markets, so we could see how both the containment and health measures and also these strategies influence the sales performance of department store chains in the various markets. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to talk about them one by one. And this is a bit of a difficult slide to maybe interpret. But anyways, this particular slide looks at how first strategy, this curbside pickup, worked under various measures of containment and health health strength measures in particular markets. So if you look at the left-hand column, CHI, that's containment and health index, 20, 40, and 60. Those are sort of strengths of these containment and health measures as measured by this Oxford group in a particular market. So 20 is relatively mild, 40 is sort of a moderate, lockdown type measures, and 60 is more stringent lockdown measures. Now, if you then move to the circled numbers on the right-hand column, that's just our assessment. We ran these models and we had sort of assessment of whether this strategy of curbside pickup made a difference in terms of sort of sales for department stores in a particular market. We have weekly sales. And so the numbers actually themselves don't matter. It's just the trends that really matter. And so if you look at low containment and health index, the sort of the top circled number, in that chart, the negative number, and then it becomes a positive number in the middle and a stronger positive number down the bottom. So that indicates that as the containment and health index has sort of increased, as the lockdown measures increased, this particular strategy became more important to generating sales. So it was a strategy that was a very sort of successful strategy during the strictest lockdown times of that pandemic. Next slide, please. So the second strategy is this return window extension strategy. And again, we looked at it under three different levels of containment and health index. And again, as you're going down from the top to the bottom, the lockdown measures are increasing. And again, we see that the numbers get bigger as we go down towards from the top to the bottom, circled numbers. So this again is an indication that this particular strategy worked best as the containment and health measures were the strictest. Next slide. Okay, the third strategy was virtual try-on, and this shows the opposite result. This shows that in fact the virtual try-on was actually better when the containment and health index measures were actually less stringent. And so the virtual try-on may be, we think, a more sustainable strategy in a post-pandemic environment, since it seems to work best when the containment and health index measures are not all that strict. And we think that the reason why is that we think that although, yes, you go and you sort of use this virtual try-on to make online purchases, we do think this works well with a multimodal retail strategy where you have both online and also physical retail channels, multi-channel retail strategy. So you can go and try things online, but still a lot of people want to go and feel the fabric and see whether or not the fit is exactly as good as it looks online. So this virtual try-on does work very well with also physical channels being open. So a lot of companies have both online and physical channels, and this is an indication that this technology works well when both channels are operating. Next slide. Finally, we looked at some companies had all three of these response strategies, and all three of these response strategies did work well during the pandemic, especially during the strictest lockdown measures of the pandemic. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Xiaodan now to talk about flexible e-commerce strategies.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Hello, everyone. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper about flexible e-commerce strategy. If you notice, Professor Dressner already mentioned about the individual response strategy during the pandemic, but sometimes from operation perspective, we want to treat this strategy as a bundle. So let me explain. Before we dig deeper about flexible e-commerce strategy, I want to give a typology. As a researcher, we always love some type of typology or theoretical contribution. So we want to talk about the consumer research shopping behavior. If you take a look at the matrix on my screen, you can see consumer research shopping behavior. We can measure consumer shopping behavior from their research and where they make the purchase. From a research perspective, consumer may make research either online or in store. For make purchase perspective, consumer may make purchase whether online or in store. With these two measures, two dimension, we can have a matrix. There could be some single channel consumer. For example, consumer may just research online and purchase online. We call them online consumers. Similarly, there could be consumers, maybe those seniors, they just love to, for example, I research in store, finally I want to make purchase in store. So we call this consumer offline consumer. However, nowadays, especially after the pandemic, we see the trend, more and more consumers, they become multi-channel consumer. Especially, there are some consumers, they may want to research in store, but make a purchase online. We call them showrooming consumer. On the other hand, there are some consumer may want to research online, finally make purchase in store. We call this consumer web rooming consumers. So with this in mind, we want to say the trend right now is a multi-channel consumer. Most of us, we are either a showrooming consumer or web rooming consumer. Okay, with this in mind, to accommodate consumer multi-channel research shopping behavior, so consumer try to seek those seamless purchasing process. For example, they start from research and then make payment and then acquisition, then recovery. Acquisition means either delivery or pickup. Recovery means those return policies. To accommodate consumer multi-channel research shopping, retailer can offer a bundle of strategies, or they can orchestrate those resources to achieve competitive advantage in the market. So this is the background for flexible e-commerce strategy. Actually, we got the support from Earnest. We get data in, I think, the early pandemic. Then we start to collect data for, especially for non-essential industry, for their e-commerce strategy. Here, I want to provide some typology because we want to see here how willingness those retailer want to offer their flexible e-commerce strategy. The first one related to research shopping. The first one is that the willingness to offer interactive website research. For example, if you take a look at the list here, there could be video, review, rating, Q&A, even can provide some predictive products. Some new one, as Professor Dressler mentioned, there could be virtual try-on. Right now, you can see more and more retailers start to adopt chatbot. So if we look at this interactive web research, there could be, we can have a structure. For example, some of these features, there may be inside out. Others may be outside in. For example, you allow your customer put a rating or review. Some may be spanning. You can talk to your customer via chatbot, or you can allow your customer to do virtual try. So this is about the interactive website research features. The second one is about payment spectrum. So you can see here, except for those traditional credit card or debit card, right now we see the trend. More and more retailers start to offer a diverse of payment methods. Especially, we see the trends after the pandemic, actually start from during the pandemic, more and more retailers start to offer buy now, pay later. So this is very popular right now. Continue. With this research and shopping after the consumer make the payment, they need to seek the methodology, the methods about how to fulfill their orders. So there are two parts here. One is the willingness to offer omni-fulfillment services, or we can call this hybrid fulfillment. The second one is willingness to offer online fulfillment services. For omni, I think we are familiar with this omni fulfillment, such as buy online, pick up in store, and the curbside pickup. Even some retailer offer reserve online pickup in store. That means consumer can reserve online, then come to the store. Finally, they make the payment in store. This is from acquisition perspective, how consumer get their products. From a recovery perspective, for omni-fulfillment, actually most retailers have offered buy online, return in store. So this is over 90%. So retailers have this practice. Take a look about the online fulfillment services. Similarly, I categorize these services into either acquisition or recovery. For acquisition, you can buy online, free shipping, or buy online, next day delivery. For recovery, we see the trend. Some retailers start to offer, let's say, free return shipping. Absolutely, all the consumer care about returns. And especially we care about the convenience or leniency of the return policy, such as online return processing. So this is about service fulfillment. In the data collection process, we notice more and more retailers have those platform partnership. So here, I categorize this platform partnership into two groups. One is willingness to offer platform commerce. These are those traditional marketplaces like Amazon, Walmart, eBay. And during the pandemic, we see the trends. More and more retailers start to consider social commerce. For example, Facebook, Instagram, they already offer this social commerce. Now it's very popular, especially for those young consumers. Okay, continue. With these flexible e-commerce practices, we also need to consider market dynamics. The market dynamics could be from three dimensions. One could be about environmental volatility. For example, the economic recession, for example, let's say the pandemic, or even the disaster. So we call all of this environmental uncertainty. Also, from market perspective, there could be technological disparity, such as digital divide. For some market, maybe with higher level of internet infrastructure inequality or socioeconomic inequality. I'm going to provide an example a bit later. The last one, we should pay attention to consumer behavior dynamic. Right now, as I mentioned, more and more consumer, they engage in those multi-channel purchasing, and they love to adopt those innovative technology. Okay, so here I want to provide an example. Actually, it's one research we conducted using the Earnest data. The example mainly focuses on service fulfillment and digital divide. So as I mentioned, for service fulfillment, we categorize such service fulfillment into hybrid fulfillment and online fulfillment. Within hybrid fulfillment, we have acquisition. We also have recovery. Similarly, for online fulfillment, we have acquisition and recovery. The study is based on 157 omni apparel retailer. We collect the data from Earnest data. You can see there's about 12 subcategory. Okay, continue. So before we talk about those fulfillment, here is the distribution of these retailers' e-commerce strategy. So you can see actually within this apparel industry, we see there is a big variation in terms of their e-commerce strategy. Let's talk about the fulfillment one. For example, if you take a look at the top one in the blue circle here, the top histogram is about the omni fulfillment. So we consider full type of omni practices, but you see most of the retailers have either 2 or 3. I think for where less retailer adopt curbside pickup, and also less retailer adopt reserve online and pickup in store. As Professor Dressner mentioned, for curbside pickup, some retailer may not willing to offer it because consumers are not going to have the chance to walk into the store. And for reserve online, pickup in store, similarly, the payment happened in store, not online. But if you take a look at those online fulfillment services, we can see retailers, especially in apparel, they already offer a wide variety of online fulfillment. we haven't a good chance to collect data for the social commerce. This is for the web research, for the payment, and for omni fulfillment, online fulfillment, and platform partnership. Okay. So here in this study, based on the Earnest sales data, we bring in some market characteristic, such as digital divide. We collect the digital divide data from Purdue Digital Divide Index. Within the digital divide, there are two subcategories. One about infrastructure inequality. If you take a look at the screen in the red rectangle. The second one is socioeconomic inequality. For internet infrastructure, most of the measures you can see relate to either the internet or infrastructure. But for socioeconomic, there could be about education, about income, about consumer age, and even disability. Okay, so based on our research experience, I feel the very valuable part of Earnest data is that it offers the market variation. For example, in this study, actually we focus on over 700 small and mid-sized cities. So we collect data from Earnest data. This small size and mid-sized city, they have population from 50,000 to 500,000. In this way, when we conduct research, we can reduce the complexity of cities, because we all know a huge city is kind of equal many small cities. So that's the reason for this study, we focus on small and mid-sized cities. So we collect data from another platform, they call it City Health Dashboard. They categorize cities into different types. This is very interesting. This allows us to match the city type with Earnest data. Based on our observation, we can see the online sales is higher in certain cities. For example, like let's say, like working towns or college towns. So they kind of love those online purchasing. But indeed, there's some cities where per city where they have very lower level of e-commerce activity. Continue. So some preliminary results. This is research with some of the colleagues. You can see here. The first one, we want to observe how does the omni fulfillment and online fulfillment contribute to the online sales. If you take a look at my screen, we can easily find the willingness of a retailer to offer broader either omni or online fulfillment contribute to online sales. Next one. Absolutely, we find a market digital divide level has a negative impacts on online sales because consumers face challenge to using the online channel. Then our interest is to see will this online omni fulfillment or online fulfillment can mitigate the negative impacts of digital divide on online sales. If you take a look at the results is very interesting. Actually, based on this over 100 omni apparel retailer, we find for those retailers who are willing to offer broader omni fulfillment, is very helpful to bridge the digital divide. So if you take a look at the results, here I have a blue oval. The DDI multiplied omni is positive and significant. I think this is a study about the flexible e-commerce strategy in a dynamic market environment. Now I'm going to leave it to Professor Dressner to talk about data and insights.
Okay, thanks a lot. I'll just wrap this up fairly quickly. We're going to talk about sort of our use of Earnest data and how other individuals, researchers, or retailers or managers might want to use the data. Next slide, please. Okay, so what we try to do is we try to collect some data based on historical purchase habits and try to use those data to talk about strategies, current strategies that companies are undertaking, in the current market, and also to hopefully provide some predictive results so that we can think about if these strategies are adopted, how might future sales change? Next slide. Okay, we use an econometric procedure called difference in difference estimation. And if you take a look at the graph, what you see is a sort of a red line and a green line. And the red line and the green line are supposed to represent our treatment group and our control group. So we see that prior to some sort of an intervention, the treatment group and the control group experience what we call parallel trends. So if you think about this in terms of sales, so over years, both the sales of both the treatment group and the control group are growing at about the same rate. Slope of those two lines is the same. And then some treatment happens, something happens. It could be a new technology is introduced, or it could be some sort of natural type thing. It could be a pandemic, that, or maybe let's call it a hurricane that affects some markets but not other markets. So this natural treatment happens in some places but not in other places, or some technology, something is introduced by some retailers and not by other retailers. So we have a divergence between the treatment group and the control group, and you can see that in this case the sales of the treatment group goes up at a much steeper slope than the control group. And so this is how we sort of tease out the impact of certain strategies or natural events on retailers. Next slide. Okay, so future research we're looking at, we're going to look further at the adoption of virtual try-on technology on sales performance, and we have collected data from Earnest Analytics on the eyewear industry, and so we really want to see how this. And actually, virtual try-on technology is probably most mature in the eyewear industry. People use it to buy glasses, and so we're trying to see how this technology has impacted various types of retailers, those that are just pure online retailers, those that are pure physical retailers, and those that have both online and physical channels. And we have some preliminary results that we're really pleased with. I think so far they tell a pretty interesting story. Next slide. Okay, we're also looking at delivery platforms and the impact on restaurant sales. Initially, we thought the treatment was the pandemic. The pandemic had an impact on these restaurants, and they changed their strategies. A lot of them started to partner with these delivery platforms like Uber Eats, DoorDash, Grubhub, and so this changed the way that they sold their food, sold their meals. And so we're looking more closely at what's the value of these partnerships to the restaurants, what's the value of these partnerships to the retailers. We're also looking at partnerships in terms of not just restaurants, but also looking at partnerships in terms of grocery retailers, the value of these partnerships like Instacart to the retail stores that sell retail groceries, and to the value to the platforms themselves. Next slide. Okay, I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity again to speak to you, and especially to Earnest Analytics for giving us this opportunity, and also for providing us these data.
Of course, thank you so much for coming on, and amazing insights. We're looking forward to seeing what you have to say about the eyewear industry and restaurant delivery. So thanks for joining us. That was Dr. Pan and Dr. Dresner of Concordia and University of Maryland, who led us through post-COVID e-commerce strategies based on transaction data. I believe we have a few questions, so wanted to take those quickly. Remember, you can put them in the Q&A box. The first one is for Dr. Martin. You started off your presentation by highlighting the decline in the department store sector over the past few decades. Can the strategies that you described that were introduced by the department stores turn the sector around, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly it helped them survive the pandemic. I'm not clearly convinced that this is going to be that these strategies are going to be ones that allow the department store sector to turn around. It's just because like the one that we think is going to be most valuable in the post-pandemic world, the virtual try-on strategy can also be adopted by other types of retailers, those that are specialty retailers and apparel retailers like Gap or whatever. So I'm not convinced that the strategy itself is going to be sufficient to allow the department store sector to turn around. I think that they're going to continue to struggle as they face more competition from online retailers and specialty retailers.
I see. It sounds like that innovation is going to become more table stakes coming forward for all retailers. And for Dr. Pan, you mentioned that the retailers they're adopting innovative practices like virtual try-on, chatbots, buy now, pay later to boost e-commerce. Do you think you could share any trends and how widely these practices have already been embraced? Is there still a long way to go with adoption of these? Like, where are we on that curve?
Yes, thank you, Michael. Actually, we right now have some study regarding this innovative practice. Let's say, for example, for virtual try-on, some study in progress. We checked the virtual try-on practice for around, I think, 30 eyewear companies. We noticed around 60% of eyewear merchant in the Earnest data, they have adopted eyewear. They have adopted virtual try-on tech. Regarding the chatbot and buy now, pay later, we got a chance to take a look not apparel. Instead, we take a look at the furnishing industry. We noticed around 30% of furnishing merchants in the datasets have adopted buy now, pay, adopt chatbot. And around from 20 to 30%, they have adopted buy now, pay later. But when we look at the data, it's the early 2023. I believe now the trend is kind of like an increase. One thing I want to point out here is that all this new tech is kind of like online techniques, or it's kind of like a digital techniques. So when retailer offer these online innovative techniques, because consumer may like do the purchasing where virtual try, where chatbot, they need to kind of think about how to accommodate recovery process, especially for return leanings. For example, consider return window, monetary leniency, or scope, or exchange. So this will accommodate consumer to adopt this new tech.
Got it. So you're saying there's still a lot of wood to chop in that, especially in the recovery area. And obviously you didn't even mention, any innovation in the in-store process right now. So there's a whole other research topic waiting out there for us. All right. Well, thank you again so much. With that, I'm afraid we have to wrap it up for the day. Again, Dr. Dresner, Dr. Pan, thanks again for joining.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.